Okay, hello everybody. This is Kip Creel calling from Atlanta. I am the principal of Standpoint, and I appreciate you joining me during my lunch hour to talk to you a little bit about a front end of innovation assignment that was completed early this year for one of our clients. And the reason this particular presentation is noteworthy is that this is a rather large organization, and this was the first time they had ever completed a formal front end of innovation assignment. And they were gracious enough to work with us after the fact to disclose specifics about what they did, what they learned, and that if they were to do it over again, what they would do differently. And I thought this, for any of you that might be considering this type of activity in the future, I think that there's some really good lessons and some really good best practices that came out of this effort. So what I wanted to start off with, just with a little bit of a commercial interlude here, is give you a little bit more information about what we do. Standpoint, we are a consultancy. We do a significant amount of work in the front end of innovation. And people always ask us, well, what are you good at? And well, we're good at bringing the voice and the ideas of people into your innovation efforts. Most of the methods that we use in these types of assignments are aligned to the behavioral sciences with the goal of maximizing the engagement of the people involved. And the reason that maximizing engagement is important is that we get higher levels of contributions, and when those contributions are increased, we find that we get deeper insights, and then ultimately our clients get better results. So the framework that we use for this client is also the framework that we use for all of our front end of innovation assignments, and we refer to it as SCORE. Each letter in the SCORE acronym stands for a step in the process. And you can see that listed down at the bottom there, which is scope, consult, originate, refine, and evaluate. And most of the labels are self-explanatory, but certainly if you are embarking on a front-end assignment, scoping the project is extremely important, and it should be a slow and deliberate scoping process with the key goal of making sure that the assignment obviously is going to be linked to your innovation strategy and also your business strategy. And you'll see that come to life a little bit more when we get into the case study. The consult phase is where we actually go out and we, in this case, this was consumer research, but we went out and assessed the attitudes, usage, their needs, motivations, pain points, kind of all those ordinary things that you would do in qualitative research. But the real magic comes after the fact, which is often an internal activity, is where you take that feedback and you convert these into insights, and you then take these insights and you frame up opportunities. And I'll give you some very clear examples of what these things are as we move through the presentation. Once these opportunities are framed up, these are then submitted into an ideation, which we refer to as originate. Once these ideas are generated, you then start moving into a process of converting these into concepts. And then at some point in this process, once you've filled your funnel with lots and lots of ideas and concepts, they need to be evaluated and prioritized somehow. So the flow is generally the same for each, the framework is the same for each front end of innovation assignment that we do. The different methods and techniques and sort of how we accomplish different steps will differ, right, depending on your own unique circumstances. The framework is very well aligned with design thinking, which, and it's also, as you can obviously see, it's a very consumer, customer, or end user centric process. One of the key differences of our process, and this applies to when we do consumer research, and I mentioned to you earlier, is that we do deliberate things to try to maximize the engagement and output of the people involved. And in this particular assignment that we completed for our client, we deliberately put consumers at key points in the process that had specific skill sets that were necessary. So as I mentioned before, the consult phase is where we go out and we try to identify these needs and pain points and these motivations and beliefs, and that there is an innovation archetype that we refer to as a storyteller that's ideal for the job. And we have found when we've done side-by-side comparisons in consumer research where we use a storyteller versus where we don't, we typically get about 2x the number of kind of idea sort of need states if we were just using a general population type of individual. And in this assignment as well, when we moved into the ideation or the originate phase, we deliberately staffed people that are very good at divergent thinking, very good at coming up with new and unique solutions to the problems that were identified, and that these individuals, their archetype is a creative and a problem solver. After these ideas are generated, you then move into perhaps some more concrete exercises of taking all of this raw material and converting it into concepts. And in this particular instance, the problem solver and the implementer can function as more convergent thinkers and be able to convert this raw material very effectively into concepts. The implementer is probably the superstar when it comes to writing concepts. They are very sensory type of people, tend to be very fact driven, and that's what you really, really want your concepts to be, sort of fact driven, not superlative driven. And they're very, very good at that process. So in this particular case study, just be mindful that we did employ these consumers with these traits at these different steps. So the company that we partnered with was Spectrum Brands. They are about a $3 billion consumer products goods company. Their primary headquarters is in St. Louis, and they do have a very large franchise in pet products. This particular product category that we were exploring was around dog chews and dog treats, and you can see Fido enjoying one of those things right there in that picture. So I wanted to walk you through the specific steps that Spectrum employed, and then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, wanted to talk a little bit about, and this is sort of their assessment of the assignment of what they felt worked really well, and sort of what they learned as an organization coming out of this assignment. As I mentioned before, scoping the assignment is extremely important, and I think that what Spectrum did very, very well is from the get-go, they were extremely clear in terms of how this assignment fit their business strategy. And if you guys go back to your business textbooks, right, if you're looking for growth, there's sort of 4 ways to do that, right? You can develop new products, you can get greater penetration, you can develop new markets, or you can diversify your business. I mean, those are really your 4 strategic options. And Spectrum was very, very clear that we were hinging on 2 of those. That this, for one aspect of this, was to get greater penetration of some existing products globally. And then second, was also to fill their pipeline with new products with the hope, of course, of getting greater shelf space inside the U.S. and outside the U.S. So also a very well-defined project parameter. Let me give you an example of what we mean by this. Many of you probably will hear me at times if we've interacted before. I said when you're scoping an innovation assignment, where the altitude at which you fly the airplane is extremely important. Had we gone into this assignment saying we are going to innovate around chews and dog chews and dog treats, that's too narrow. That actually is too narrow, because what would have come out of this were more innovations, and more very common and close-in innovations that were, um, like chews and treats that you see today in the store. We redefine the parameter on this essentially to be anything that you would want to put in your dog's mouth, and notice the operative word would want to put in your dog's mouth, that's not food and that is not a toy. Specifically, hybrids were okay. So, in fact, some of the unique things that came out of this were some hybrids between kind of toys and treats and chews. And we also, probably wrongly, also, and I'll explain this a little bit further. We also said that business model innovations or even like services were also in scope. Um, so you want to try to define where you fly that airplane, not too high, not too low, but you want that lens to be a little bit broader than your product, your primary product category, because it's going to give the consumer, the customer, the end user to give you feedback in a broader realm. And then when you go into ideation, you've got a little bit broader playing field, of where ideas, can originate from. The other good thing, that we felt, looking back, is that there were a lot of hypotheses that the organization had going into this assignment. Hypotheses around, ideas that the consumer might have, or, some hypotheses about how maybe positioning on a couple of their products were off, outside the United States. This is a very, very important discussion to have during the scope, because it gives us, as a consultants, a lot of guidance on where we want to frame the conversations when we go out and engage with the consumer, customer, or end user. Leadership alignment, critical. Just to give you a sense that before, this project started, is that there was probably, I would say, 6 to 7 rounds, of a proposal, making sure that, every detail was spelled out in the proposal in terms of what the scope and the process, and what the expected output. There were 2 meetings with leadership to get them aligned, and then we had a day-long scoping workshop with the core, project team, to make sure that we were all on the same page before we, spent the first dime, and engaged the first, consumer in the research process. So extensive project scoping kept the team aligned through the entire process. There was no questions whatsoever about what the purpose, the objectives, and the outcome of the assignment was to be. Something that we learned, and we do tend to guide consumers on this, our clients, I should say, on this, is that going into these assignments, it's really, really important that you've developed a definition for your organization as to what you define as innovative, and set those expectations during the scoping exercise. It was very difficult for Spectrum to articulate this in the beginning, since it was their first time doing this, but they now see that, the importance of saying that we would consider ideas and concepts innovative if they had sort of these characteristics or these properties. And it's extremely important, because that gives everybody involved further parameters, of how close in or how far out do you want these potential ideas or these potential concepts. I alluded to this before, but, what was in scope for this assignment were non-product innovations. So, just for grins, we threw in and said, hey, we can kind of talk about services or changes in business model. Had we were to do this over again, we probably would have pulled that out, for a couple of reasons. One, it was just too much, to talk about with the consumer. When we engaged with them, we spent the vast majority of time talking about product ideas. We always had services, and we always had business model in our back pocket, but we never got to it. Then when we moved into ideation with the consumers as well as the internal team, everybody wanted to focus on product, which is sort of the natural instinct, right, of most of these teams. I would have probably done a separate ideation session around services and business model, and sort of kept the product one on its own. We attempted, I think, really to try to cram too much in our engagement with the consumer, customer, and user. And again, there just was no time to address that other dimension of innovation during the ideation. It is something that we could always go back and revisit later. And we've got the insights that would lead to some good ideation on these dimensions, but it just was not possible to cram all of this in. The other thing I think Spectrum said looking back is that, again, this was the first time that they had done this assignment, is we need some type of consistent metrics throughout the whole process for the business team, for the consumers, for anybody that's involved in evaluating ideas, to have a consistent set of metrics to do this. And we did use a consistent set of metrics. I think Spectrum admitted that they didn't really sort of understand the importance of that going into the assignment, but they certainly understood the importance of that coming out of the assignment. And you'll see why, just because of the sheer number of ideas that were generated. And as you move through this, you generate so much. It's you need some process throughout this to kind of continue to whittle ideas down. So in the consult phase, which was the second step in the process, was a very large effort. The organization did qualitative research in 7 countries. Following that, we did our insight generation and our opportunity area development. And again, that was an internal activity. In most cases, we would take the lead on that, but then we would re-engage with the core team, have them look at the insights that we came up with and evaluate the quality of those insights. And we have an operating definition of what an insight is, and you'll see that listed there on the right-hand side of the screen. And as insights were generated, we kept the good ones and we sort of deprioritized the bad ones, because there are criteria that you would use to evaluate a very good insight. So once we had what we felt to be the good pool of insights, those things can easily be laddered up into opportunity areas. We then took those insights and those opportunity areas, because we actually came up with probably about, I would say about 10 or 12 kind of insight statements. These were prioritized by the consumer in an online survey. And again, this was just a process of, once the insights came out of the qualitative research, to really understand the true priority and the prevalence of these insights among the target population. And then we created our finalized opportunity areas. So to kind of give you an example of an opportunity area and sort of how insights sort of ladder up to opportunity areas, I gave you an example from a different client, different project. But in this instance, the target were people that paint commercial airframes. And an insight that came out of that was the time that it takes to install window coverings takes me away from more critical processes in airplane painting. And these insights are often framed as a belief or a motivation. And this is really critical to sort of nail that insight, because understanding that and developing solutions around that insight is extremely important, because it's the acknowledgement of the insight as well as developing solutions that address it that's going to change behavior. So these are very insight-driven opportunity areas, and a collection of these opportunity areas basically becomes your innovation roadmap. So for this particular assignment, we had 6 validated opportunity areas or demand spaces globally. Some other outputs of this is that there were market-specific recommendations because these OAs had different degrees of importance in the different countries. So they were able to allocate our innovation resources globally where opportunity area A indexed considerably higher than maybe opportunity area B. And then some claims, a hierarchy of claims, global segmentation. They also, as I said, part of this was some positioning on products. They validated the need to change the positioning on some existing products. So not only, if you go out and do this research, can it be focused on just innovation, but there are sort of other marketing objectives that can be folded into these assignments. In talking to Spectrum after the fact, this is what they stated that they learned. They felt as though that these opportunity areas would have a shelf life of about 3 to 5 years, and they do intend to plan to stick to these 6 opportunity areas as their innovation roadmap. They also were able, as I alluded to before, to adjust the priority of these opportunity areas based on market-specific data that came out of this survey that was done. And this does not mean after this assignment is done that more ideas won't be generated, but what they felt that this becomes a good tool is to continue to evaluate quality of ideas that come into the organization based on their linkage to this opportunity area and also the priority of this opportunity area. And then as teams continue to ideate internally, the plan is to stick to these opportunity areas if subsequent ideation is to occur. And then they also plan on any external idea submissions that come into the organization as they evaluate those and prioritize those ideas based on the degree to which they align to these opportunity areas. For the organization, because we had 6, these 6 opportunity areas now are going to be considered product development platforms for Spectrum. And each of these opportunity areas as a platform, they will now begin to measure the return on product development expense against each of these opportunity areas. So products will begin to hit the market in second quarter next year. So they will begin to measure cumulative gross margin on each of these opportunity areas as a share of overall product development expense. So this would be one way that they would begin to measure the return on this platform that now is kind of part of their overall product portfolio. So the last couple of steps in the process, the originate, the way that ideas were generated is that we took these 6 opportunity areas. We knew which ones were the priorities. We submitted the top 2, 3 into an ideation session. It took 2 days of ideation in the US and 2 days of ideation in the UK. The key here is we involved the client, cross-functional teams. So there were people from marketing, product development, and R&D. And in each workshop, we included somewhere to 6 to 8 consumers that met our target consumer criteria. They were part of the process. They also indexed very high on creativity and problem solving. So this can be if done correctly, these can be an extremely productive exercise. In the US, there were just shy of 300 ideas, and these were just idea kernels. These were synthesized down to 18 preliminary concepts, and in the UK, 150 ideas and synthesized down to 15 preliminary concepts. In the US and the UK, the US got to see, the US got to see some of the UK's concepts and vice versa. So we ultimately narrowed this down to 6 priority recommendations. The team and the consumer made the priorities based on what the organization considered to be high feasibility and also high consumer interest. And that was one of the benefits of having the consumer in this process, is because we heard from them firsthand saying, I would go buy like V6 today. I gotta have it. I gotta have it. So it's really getting that immediate, I gotta have it feeling directly from the mouth of the consumer because they were there, that gave us the confidence to prioritize these more subjectively. So much so that of the six, two concepts were fast tracked to development just based on the overall enthusiasm from the team. So in talking to Spectrum after the fact, I said, well, what did you guys learn from this? And the comment was, well, the ideation is like drinking from a fire hose. I mean, you can see the numbers there. It was 400 plus ideas coming out of this 4 days of effort. That their funnel is so full now that they need to develop an idea management system, and in their innovation process to assign a person whose job is to mine the idea bank. Because even though we fast track some concepts, we've got 4 others that are high priority, there's still hundreds of ideas that you can pull forward out of an idea management system, knowing that this probably is going to have a shelf life of 3+ years. So somebody needs to be managing this idea bank. They did not want to budget for this at this point in time, but they do now see the need of having perhaps an intermediate step of doing some more formalized consumer screening of these ideas before moving into concept development. And then organizationally, they've decided that they are going to develop a KPI around the management of these ideas. So in other words, they can track the progress of idea movement from the idea bank. And they've developed some algorithm to do that. So it's sort of the number in the bank versus the number that go into their system. What they call an idea to discussion rate, an idea advancement rate, and an idea kill rate. They see a significant need to kind of manage and develop some KPIs around this vast number of ideas. The other thing that they're going to begin to do is to track the idea source. So this FEI was all basically, consumer and a mix of consumer and internal ideas. But they also get ideas from their retailers, and they want to be able to begin to track the source of ideas. And in doing so, they will begin to develop some metrics about where they think the best ideas are coming from. And then they see the need to obviously, as I said before, to continue to link these ideas back to those opportunity areas and weight them. So weight the idea based on the strength of the opportunity area. And because there was some intermediate quantitative research done, we know the strength, the prevalence, and the priorities of these opportunity areas numerically, and you can apply weights. So if an idea is linked to OA number 1, and that's a strong OA, it gets a higher priority than idea 2 that's linked to an alternative opportunity area. So the last phase was an evaluate phase. So we basically took those 6. I think we had, we came out of there with 33 concepts. The 6 priority recommendations. Those 6 priority recommendations were submitted just to develop some metrics for leadership to validate the potential of those 6 concepts. And of those 6 concepts, they were able to prioritize the development of which concepts would be sequenced. And these were in addition to the 2 that they already fast tracked. This company does not subscribe to any benchmark systems like BASES. So we had to develop an internal benchmark We did that by having the consumer in a survey environment evaluate our new concepts against a product that was already on the market with a known track record. There were two concepts that indexed extremely high against the known product, and that gave us even more confidence that we wanted to move those into our development process. And again, as Spectrum would say, that now we see kind of the need to have again this consistent set of metrics across the board, and we also see the need to have evaluation metrics not just for pet products, but for all of the different business units and all the ideas and all the concepts that are coming into our innovation process. And then over time, they plan on linking commercial results back to concept testing metrics to maybe build some better predictive models. And because of the nature of their products, in which we are big advocates, is moving towards some more behavioral techniques in the future. So instead of, we could bypass the concept test. One of the ideas is to fast track the development of some of these small batches of product that did very, very well in earlier phases, and just take it out to the consumer and sort of gauge acceptance before kind of scaling that across the organization. And can easily be done in food and pet products because there are so many contract manufacturers. The raw ingredients are pretty easily accessible. So if you ever have the ability to just fast track a prototype or fast track either in a low fidelity or high fidelity prototype, we always advocate that because you can actually get more consistent behavioral read on the consumer acceptance. So following this, we also asked Spectrum, well, what happened that you didn't expect? And these were we actually did a survey of the global team. And across the globe, the team consisted of about 30 individuals. But some of the comments that said, we didn't expect the team to be so aligned. They felt like that the way that the process went is that it's very good at keeping marketing and R&D aligned on the priorities. I do think that they did comment that they were pleased with the creativity of the consumers that we involved. And, there was this bias that, well, you really can't innovate around a dog chew or a dog treat. But I think they now believe that, yes, with the right process and with the right consumers, you can certainly do that. They had the confidence to fast track certain concepts without, the complete set of data. Many of them said, just because I heard face to face the consumer saying, I got to have this, that gave us enough confidence to just move it right into development. They now understand the importance of designing products around an insight and a demand space versus what literally people tell you they would like. They felt like they didn't expect, but they now have a very clear innovation roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years. Shared commonality of these demand spaces across the globe. And we hear this a lot, and it kind of pains me to some extent because I am a numbers guy, but many on the team felt like the qualitative research, and again, that face-to-face time, was more confidence building in what steps they needed to take than the quantitative research. And really where the quantitative research was just sort of, in their mind, kind of a last stopgap, disaster check, right, on some of these concepts before they pull them into their innovation process. We also queried the project team on, again, their satisfaction with the process. I think generally we were pleased with their level of satisfaction. I think, obviously there's always room for improvement with these types of projects. But overall, the team felt like that it was a good investment. And in terms of how valuable was the process in achieving business needs, Again, we felt like we were pretty pleased with the reaction of the team from the survey that was conducted internally. And then just some final comments is how would you rate the quality of the insights, and then determines the quality of the deliverables overall, like in terms of the concepts, the level of innovativeness of these concepts. And again, I think we were pretty pleased. This is a tough category to innovate because it's essentially dog chews and dog treats. But I do think, and the team felt that we were able to give them some things that ultimately will lead to some commercial success. And encouragingly, Spectrum, because of the relationship that we have with them, we will be getting some actual sales figures from them after these products are launching beginning in Q1, Q2 of 2019. So over time, we will be able to give you a very specific return on their investment in the front end of innovation. They were great partners to work with, and we're one of the first clients in a while that have been willing to share sort of this level of data with us. If you guys would, our plan is to put this presentation up on our website. My email address is listed here if you would like to reach out and ask questions. But we do have a couple more minutes. There is a Q&A function. If you see a button there called Q&A. So if any of you have any questions that you want me to address right now, I'm happy to do that. And I'll just hang tight here for a couple minutes to do that. Any questions? Go ahead, and hopefully you're able to find that button. All right. I don't see anyone attempting to pose a question. So what I would ask that you do, if you do have some questions, just take note of my email address, kcreel@standpointgroup.com, and be happy to provide you a copy of the deck if you're so interested. Be happy to answer any questions that you have, and also a copy of this presentation will be posted on our website in short order. Thanks again, guys. I really appreciate your time and interest. Have a great day and go innovate. Thank you.